Welcome to the Fibromyalgia Podcast. I'm your coach, Tami Stackelhouse, and this is episode 109. In today's episode, I interview certified fibromyalgia coach Gisèle McDiarmid. We're talking about her fibromyalgia journey. Now, like many of you, Gisèle went through several years of not finding good answers. In fact, the medication, supplements, and treatments that were supposed to help her get better made her even more sick. Maybe you can relate to that. Today, she is sharing what she uncovered that made all the difference: a diagnosis of MCS, multiple chemical and environmental sensitivities. So, what do you do when the things that are supposed to help you feel better make you feel worse? That is the question I asked Gisèle today. Now, as you listen to Gisèle's story, I want you to remember that this is, of course, her story. Every person, every healing journey is unique. What worked for Gisèle may or may not work for you. The things that she was sensitive to may or may not be an issue for you. So we want you to take the information that we share today as new ideas, new information you can take to your own doctors to help you find answers. And we want to remind you that, as always, the information we include in this podcast is not meant to be considered medical advice, nor is it intended to replace consulting with a qualified physician or other healthcare provider. As I said, we hope that this will give you new ideas and new information you can go talk to your own doctors about. Now, let me introduce you to Gisèle. Gisèle McDiarmid is a certified fibromyalgia coach and registered health coach with a BA in psychology. She has been living with fibromyalgia, ME/CFS, and multiple chemical sensitivities for over 25 years. Before becoming a coach, Gisèle worked as a neurology nurse in Canada and the U.S. Gisèle understands the overwhelm and isolation of living with multiple invisible illnesses. Due to misdiagnoses, her health declined over 20 years, ending in a disabling health crisis. This was a major turning point that finally led to long-needed treatments and her eventual recovery. Today, Gisèle inspires and empowers others to take control of their health, expertly guiding them on their journey toward living the lives they've been dreaming of. Here's my interview with Gisèle. Hi, Gisèle. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to finally be able to share your story with everybody on the podcast.
Hi, Tami. Thanks so much for inviting me. It's so wonderful to be here.
Now, you and I have talked a little bit about your story, and I think there's some key pieces of your story that I think is really going to help our audience. So why don't you take us back and kind of start at the beginning? Before fibromyalgia, who was Gisèle? What were you doing?
Oh my goodness. So before fibromyalgia, I was an active nurse, and I loved doing nursing, and then became a mom, and became a mom to two wonderful girls, and then eventually became a mom to two wonderful stepchildren as well. So I had four little children that I was raising and was very busy. And then shortly after that, also started to become a caregiver to my elderly mother, who moved in with us, and my husband's elderly mother, who lived in her own home but nearby. They were both widowed, so they depended on us for help. And
that's a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm just thinking we haven't even gotten to the fibro part, and I'm like,
oh,
that's a lot.
Are you already tired?
I am. And this was before you started experiencing symptoms or things like that, or?
Yes. So at this point, I already had been diagnosed with Hashimoto's for about 10 years. And, that really didn't bother me. Hashimoto's, I thought, as a nurse, you understand a lot of things, right? So it was like, I always used to think if I was going to have an autoimmune disorder, Hashimoto's was the best. Because,
That's funny. I
right?
have I have Hashimoto's too, and for you listening, Hashimoto's is autoimmune thyroid. Basically, your body thinks your thyroid is evil and tries to kill it. But depending on the severity of your Hashimoto's, like I'm kind of like you, Giselle. Like all the things that I experienced, I always thought, it was fibromyalgia. It was never.
Yeah.
I never really Hashimoto's never really added to that
Yeah.
pile, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. So I always thought, hey, we know what it is. We know how to treat it. We know we have all the blood work. We can monitor how it's doing.
Yep.
We can manage it during pregnancies, which happened to me because my first pregnancy was after my first pregnancy that I was diagnosed. And then I had another pregnancy, but I was monitored properly, second baby, perfectly healthy. So I thought, this is good. We know everything we need to know. It's easy, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, fast forward, 10 years or so, actually 8 years when I remarried. And here we are. I'm in this, what they call the sandwich generation. I'm squished in there. And I'm
Between your
trying to,
kids and your parents, right?
and I'm trying to manage, right?
Yeah.
And
And
it's,
were you still working at that time too, as a nurse?
so not at that moment because the children were so young,
Mm-hmm.
and because blending two families is a lot of things to have to you need to
It's work.
focus. It's
Yeah.
work, right? And it's very
Yeah.
delicate work. So my husband and I said, you know what, let's just try and have some stability and try to focus on that. So I stayed home and did that, right? And his first wife had passed away. He was a young widower. So, I was the mom really for four kids. And so that's what I did. And so anyway, early on though, I began experiencing some other symptoms. And at first I thought, well, I'm just tired. I'm stressed out. I'm
Right.
just
And you had a
tired.
good reason to be tired and stressed out too, right? It wasn't
Right.
as if everything was normal and you're like, why do I feel this way? I mean, you had
Yeah.
lots of good reasons.
Lots of good reasons, right? I was running around, extracurricular activities, making sure meals were always on time and well balanced and nourishing. And the kids were bathed and dressed and taking
Right.
care of all the routines and helping with homework and meeting with the teachers. Well, there's so much to do. So there were good reasons for being tired and feeling stressed. But it seemed at some point that I just didn't seem to be able to, even though I was resting, even though whenever I could catch some rest, I never seemed to feel rested.
Mm-hmm.
And that was new for me.
Yeah.
And that I didn't really understand. And I'd never heard of that before, never anticipated something like that. I couldn't really recognize that, didn't know what that was all about. So I just kept going. And then at some point, see, I had been very physically active before. I used to really enjoy outdoor sports, and I really enjoyed an active lifestyle. So I tried to continue that as well. And every time, I would be like, this time I was trying to go to the gym and doing, all those exercises. And now I was starting to experience all of these injuries that was never typical.
Like what?
Knee injury, hip injury. It was like my body was just not like it was before.
Right.
And I was like, what's going on? Like, I couldn't understand my body, and it wasn't behaving like the way I could rely on it before. So here I was trying to continue to stay in shape and strong and healthy. But now I had to take pauses to take care of these injuries. And then I'd have to go to physio. And then I'd have to slow down. And then this would set me back physically because now I was losing muscle strength, right?
Right.
So then when I go back, it seemed like every time I would hurt myself more and more and more. So that was another thing that was weird.
Right.
Right? So at some point, then I started to experience respiratory infections. And this is all I'm talking about, all of this happening within probably a four-year period. It was very fast, very condensed. And these respiratory infections were recurring, almost to the point of being chronic. And it was bronchitis, sinusitis, pneumonia. And it was like, it just kept happening. And it just seemed like I couldn't stop having these. And I was always on one antibiotic or another.
Mm-hmm.
And I was thinking, asking my doctor, what is going on with me? Like, why? I went to an allergist, and the allergist said, well, you're allergic to everything. And
That's like, so helpful, right?
That's really helpful. I had no idea I was allergic to everything. But then he said, you can't receive any of the allergy shots because you have an autoimmune disorder. And he said, these will trigger your immune system. And because your immune system has already shown that it can easily become confused and turn against you, we can't give you those allergy shots because it could trigger another autoimmune disease that would be even worse than Hashimoto's.
That's so interesting. I have never heard that. And I've been having allergy shots for the last several years.
Really?
Yes. That's interesting. I wonder if that knowledge has changed, or if I'm going to have to do my own little.
That's really interesting because I am a little bit older than you.
Yeah.
So, that's very possible. So we're going back now 20 years.
And this is something I've just been doing the last few years too. So
there you go.
Very recent.
Yeah, we're going back now a good 20 years.
Yeah.
So, and then in the midst of all of that, I was also diagnosed with another autoimmune disease, which is pernicious anemia. And that one was that my small intestine, the lining of the small intestine is damaged, and I can't absorb B12 from the food that I eat. So since then, I've had to have monthly B12 injections. So all of these things were happening. Suddenly now, every year I used to have flu shots, and for at least 20 years, suddenly flu shots were causing me issues. The first time I realized that, I received the flu shot and I was literally sick for 6 months.
Wow.
It was horrible. And very sick for 6 months. Then 6 months later, it was time again for the new flu shot. And I said, I can't do this again. I don't know if it is the flu shot, but I'm just not going to take any chances. I need a break. And so I didn't take it. I was fine that winter. The following year, I thought, well, as a scientific mind, I have to
run the experiment, right?
I have to run the experiment. So I did. And I put my neck out there, and I did. And I received another flu shot. And that time I was sick for 8 months.
Wow.
So then I knew, okay, I can't, for whatever reason, I just can't tolerate the flu shot anymore. And I haven't had a flu shot ever since, and I've been fine. So all of these things were happening. I also, in that time, started to develop all kinds of inflammation issues, and things were just literally falling apart. It just seemed.
Did you have your fibro diagnosis yet?
Not yet. By the time I was 45, my doctor applied to, here in Canada, we have automatically people at 65 are given the Novavax vaccine to prevent pneumonia. When I was 45, my doctor made a special request to the government on my behalf for the Pneumovax vaccine, because I was getting pneumonia so often that he asked if I could receive the vaccine 20 years ahead of time.
Right.
And it was granted. So I did receive the vaccine, and it works because I haven't had pneumonia since.
And you didn't have a reaction to that vaccine like you did with the
No,
flu
I
vaccine?
didn't.
That's
no,
good.
I didn't. So one of the things that I have found out since then is that there's a difference between vials that are unique, that only hold enough vaccine for one injection, compared to the vials that hold like multi
Right, where
doses.
You just pull out enough for one person.
Exactly. Yeah. So the Pneumovax vaccine was only for one person, and the flu vaccines usually have 10 doses. And there are more preservatives in the multi-dose vials.
It'd be like eye drops, right? Like you could get the single-use eye drops, or you could get a bottle of eye drops, and the single-use doesn't have all the preservatives that the bottle does, right?
Exactly. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
So I think that that's maybe why I didn't react to the Pneumovax vaccine compared to the flu vaccines that I was receiving.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So, fast forward, I basically went through 2 decades of going from one health crisis to another, going from one doctor and one specialist to another. I was trying to get better. I was going to the doctor all the time with my family doctor, being sent to specialists. I had surgeries, you name it. The problem was that we would deal with these crises, but there was something else going on top of all of that was never suspected, never addressed. And that was the part that was really responsible for what was happening to me.
Right. So you're going from crisis to crisis, infection to infection, dealing with all of this. But why are you getting the infections? Right? Why is your body doing this in the first place? And you guys probably didn't even have time to ask that question, as sick as it seems as though you were.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And also because I have to say that I didn't know about these illnesses. I had never been trained. It's sad to admit it.
As a nurse.
As a nurse.
Right? So y'all, as you're listening to this, so you hear Gisèle's story and you think, well, how come nobody told me about that? Well, Giselle is a nurse. Nobody told her either.
No, no. And as you're telling me this, I have big goosebumps on my arms because, if I had known in nursing school, if I had been taught about this, so like those 20 years would not have happened.
Yeah.
I would have had a much different life, a much better life. I would have seen the signs and things would have happened differently. Education is really important.
Yes, it is.
We need to educate nurses. We need to educate doctors to recognize these signs. Mm-hmm. I had no idea what I was dealing with. So everything was invisible even to me. And that was the thing, is that there was this chronic illness, more than one chronic illness that I was actually dealing with that I wasn't aware of. And it was the chronic side of my condition that was responsible for my steady decline because it wasn't being addressed properly. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't living my life in a way that was adapted to support those illnesses.
Well, and how could you if you didn't even know that you had them, right?
No.
So, so how did you find out? How did you get your diagnoses? What were the official diagnoses?
So I found out because over time, trying to keep up with my responsibilities. Eventually, I did return to work. I worked full time. I also went back to university. I was also picking up university studies, still raising kids, taking care of moms, piling more responsibilities and feeling sicker. So I was pushing myself more and not realizing the damage I was really causing my body. Mm-hmm. I ended up experiencing a health crash, basically. And at that point, it was so severe that I was found to be disabled. I ended up in bed. I had a severe, now I can call it a fibro flare. I didn't know what it was at the time. Mm-hmm. All those years, most of those years, I actually didn't know I had fibro, but now I see it. I didn't have the kind of pain that a lot of fibromyalgia patients talk about. I later found out through genetic testing that I have a higher pain threshold than the average person. So that explains that piece as well. Mm-hmm. But at this point, when I had my health crash, it was a nasty fibro flare, let me tell you. I was in agonizing pain. I didn't know what I was dealing with. It was horrible. And the cotton balls in my head were so big, that's all I had in my head. I had nothing else. And I had all kinds of neurological symptoms. I had vertigo. I was a real mess. The list of my symptoms was so long. I was so burnt out and exhausted. It was unbelievable. My husband had to take care of me. I couldn't drive. He had to take me to doctor's appointments. I was a mess. So, make a long story short, I eventually was diagnosed. It took a while to tease all of the symptoms out. It took 1.5 years still to first receive my fibromyalgia diagnosis. And at that point, I started looking for resources to help me deal with fibromyalgia. So I did find a program in my region, and they did talk about medication and things like that. My doctor had tried to put me on some medication before that program, but I was reacting to everything that he was trying to give me. it was actually making me more sick. And that was another strange thing that we didn't understand.
I bet it, particularly as a nurse, you come from the frame of mind that, if you have a problem and this is the medication that fixes it, and then people get better. And then to do that and have it not happen, I bet was a little scary even.
It was very scary, because how could I deal with pain? Number one,
right.
I didn't know what to do. I didn't have anything that I could take.
Right.
And I couldn't sleep. I was so exhausted, but I couldn't sleep.
Yep.
And so I couldn't take anything, because even the smallest dose of any medication that he would prescribe, I would have the weirdest reaction to. And he would look at me and say, "How did that even happen?" He said, "I've never heard of a reaction like that." And I'd say, "I don't know what to say."
Right.
It happened. It just happened, and they were strange reactions. I remember one medication, the bottom half of my face became completely numb.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, really completely numb. And my tongue became completely numb, but the outside of my face was all completely numb.
Like you'd just been to the dentist, right?
Kind of, yeah. It was just so weird.
So bizarre.
So bizarre.
So what do you do with that?
Well, what do you do with that? Basically, I couldn't take any medication. I tried, and as I said, after a few attempts, it was clear that it just wasn't worth it. There were other symptoms that were a lot worse than that, and it was actually making me a lot more sick. And I'm like, I just can't handle more of what I'm just dealing with, too much already. So I decided that I just would not take any medication. My doctor was like, "Yeah, let's just not go there." So the next step was trying to find just natural ways, methods at home, Epsom salts baths, heat pad, keeping myself warm, resting, doing these things. But also at some point I decided, well, I need to have some treatments of some sort. So I tried a naturopathic doctor, and she prescribed natural things, not just supplements, but natural herbs or prescriptions. And everything that she prescribed, I also had reactions to. And
so what did you think then? Right.
Well, the mystery. The mystery just grew, because it was like, well, this is supposed to be natural.
Was there a part of your brain that was like, I don't know, intrigued? Like, here's a puzzle to figure out, and that part's kind of fun? Or were you just totally knocked out by it all?
A bit of both, I have to say.
Yeah, because I know, for me, I like solving problems. And so I know that there would be a certain amount of me that would be like, what the heck is going on? And that's like frustrating and sad and, all those things, but also interesting as a problem to solve, right?
Yes, exactly. And I really was in that mindset that I was open to everything at that point, because one thing happened when I sort of, hit bottom, right? At that point.
Yeah.
And I thought it was like, I'm open now to everything and anything, because I have no idea what I'm dealing with.
Yeah.
So
and there is like that's a little bit of a blessing, right?
Mm-hmm.
To get to that point where you are that open and maybe willing to try things that maybe you wouldn't have been open to trying before.
Exactly. Because I really was in the mindset before of traditional medicine
Right.
is the way to go, you
Yep.
know? The only other things I had tried was like chiropractic, like physio is still part of basically traditional medicine,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and acupuncture, which I really thought of they were, really for me, that all worked. But beyond that, I had never really tried anything else. So going to a naturopathic doctor was like a big step for me. And now I was reacting to what she was prescribing. So, but I was open at this point. I'm like, I don't know what I'm dealing with. And conventional medicine is, I think, not going to help. I think that's kind of where we're at. So let's just stay open, and let's just see what's out there. Let's see what I have, and let's see what's going to help me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I love it.
So so anyway, I just kind of took it that way. And in the process, I hired a health coach who was a nurse. She wasn't able to give me actual, like, um, she couldn't talk about medication or things like that. But one of the things that she did do was she did help me with my mindset, further with my mindset, because of all the years that I had been sick. As a nurse also, we're trained to sort of disconnect ourselves from our bodies, because we're trained to put others in front of us, others' needs ahead of ours.
Nursing is a hard job, and I bet there is a certain amount of disconnect you have to do to be able to go and keep working when those times are hard, right?
When those times are hard. So physically, you have to learn how to basically ignore your physical cues, because if you're going to be working a 12-hour night shift and you're tired, who cares how your body's feeling? You've got to be there for your patients, and you have to be on the ball.
And you can't just go take a bathroom break when you want.
No.
And
if you
need something.
Yeah, exactly. If they're not doing well, if they're in a code and you have terrible PMS or whatever's going on, you have to learn to ignore whatever's happening.
Which is not what you want when you're trying to tune back in to a body that needs you to listen to her, right? So I bet there was a lot of retraining in your mind for...
There was. And I had continued that mindset as a chronic patient sufferer, like who was so ill for those 20 years, taking care of 4 growing children and 2 elderly mothers who needed so much of my time and energy. So all of my needs with all of my chronic illnesses, I had disconnected also a large part of that, right?
Yeah.
So, and in the process, I became very resentful of my body. I had become very angry against my body. Like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you doing this to me? Why aren't you getting on board with the program?
Yep. Yeah. I always used to, feel like there was the real me, and then I was stuck inside this body that wasn't really me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not the way that it works.
Yeah,
I mean, that's the way we think, but that was a huge part of my healing was realizing that my body and I are actually on the same side, on the same team, and that we can work together on this, and we'll do better than if we're fighting each other.
Exactly. So that was it. I was very frustrated, very overwhelmed for a long time because of these issues. And I was repressing a lot of that. And I was very resentful of what was going on, and I hadn't realized how it was actually preventing me in many ways from moving forward in what I was trying to do now. So this wonderful nurse helped me to realize that.
That's awesome.
And so I was able to, reconnect with my body and realize, as you said, that we're on the same team. And then that was incredible, because then I was able to, I don't know, it just kind of gave me that an amazing amount of energy to really, and somehow that in itself was healing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when you're so emotionally carrying all of these negative, this negative baggage, that takes a lot of energy from you.
Exactly.
Right?
And when you stop fighting with all of that, then it frees that energy up to go somewhere positive.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Plus, it also allowed me to pay better attention to what was going on.
Yeah.
So that I was responding to it much better, responding to my body's needs much better. And I was finding new creative ways that I never would have thought of before to take care of myself. Just instinctively. It's also interesting how we can also come up with ways of taking care of ourselves when we know how to connect with our body.
Right. When we're listening to those little whispers that our body gives that may not even really make logical sense, and our body says it needs something, and being able to, respect that, trust that, go with that. Yeah.
Exactly. Now I tell my clients, when I see that they have this kind of disconnect, I like to say that they're their own best friend. Their body is their own best friend, and it's important to start seeing it that way. Take
Our
care of your
bodies will
best
tell
friend.
us what they need, and we're just not usually listening.
No. No.
So how did you then solve all of this weirdness, right? Like weird reactions to medications, weird reactions to supplements and other natural things. How did you find an answer for that?
So I just continued to do some research and to try and, it's like Nancy Drew trying to, solve the case. And reading all kinds of, research papers. And I was, trying to, put the dots together. And I eventually came across something called multiple chemical and environmental sensitivities, and how it is commonly seen. It's a common comorbidity of fibromyalgia. I had never heard of that before. And reading about...
For people who maybe are hearing this for the first time, can you define that? What is multiple chemical and environmental sensitivities? I mean, aside from clearly what the words literally mean.
Yes. So first of all, I want to say some people might have heard it under other names. It can be also called environmental illness or environmental sensitivities, chemical
I mean, like, I remember hearing decades ago now about like sick building syndrome.
Yes, you're right. Decades ago, sick building syndrome. I think even before that, it was called yuppie flu.
Oh, yes.
You
I
remember that?
too. I'm old enough to remember that. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Where, for those of you who don't know, sick building syndrome, it was not the building that got sick. It was the people in the building. It was when you would see lots of people that were maybe all working in the same building, or people living in the same apartment complex, or things like that, where the building is making people sick. But we, for a long time, didn't
Exactly.
always know like what in
Why?
that building is making people sick. Yeah.
Exactly.
So
That's
go ahead, go
right.
on.
So yeah, so it's so funny to remember those terms. So it's also called environmental illness, chemical intolerance, intoxicant-induced loss of tolerance, or TILT is the acronym for that. So nowadays, people might hear these other terms as well. And basically, what it is, it's a chronic and disabling medical condition, a syndrome, really, that develops over time, where a person will experience various physical symptoms when exposed to low levels of substances commonly used in our living space.
So do you have some examples there?
Lots of examples. So it could be, it could be any kind of chemicals. So you can think of, laundry detergent. It could be air fresheners,
scented candles.
Yes, scented candles. It can be perfume. It can also be, so these are basically what you're talking about is what we can breathe in. But it could also be, it could affect our eyes. So neon lights, for example, can be an issue. Anything that touches our skin, like cosmetics, hair products have chemicals. I mean, you name it, the list is long, right? Also, clothing. A lot of our clothing has chemicals, like yoga pants, for example.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think we all have bought a piece of clothing that, you could smell the dye, for instance.
Yes.
Or, just the fabric itself. So yeah, for
exactly. Sure. Well, take this, like, I'm gray. Why am I gray? Well, I'm gray because of my age, but because I've stopped.
You and me both, girlfriend.
But why have I stopped covering it, right? It's because the hair dye has chemicals.
The chemicals,
right?
In processing. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. And I was thinking too, like my husband and I, when we moved into our new house, right? All the paint on the walls, the carpet, all of those things, you have to let that, air out and process. And some people are more sensitive to that than others.
A new car, people love the smell of a new car. Well, that smell is chemicals. That's all chemicals, right? The smell of gas at the pump.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
But also it's on our food. When you buy that nice big brick of cheese that's wrapped in the plastic wrap and you take it off and your cheese is really nice and glistening. Well, that nice and shiny part of it, that's actually plastic that leached into your cheese. So if you don't remove that outer part, you're actually ingesting plastic.
Yeah.
Do we know that?
And how many fruits and vegetables, right? Like the waxes and the coloring that makes apples red and oranges orange, right? And that's why if you go to the store, if you see like, here's the pile of regular apples and here's the pile of organic apples, they don't look the same.
I know. We want the pretty ones.
Right. But those pretty ones are not good for you. It always makes me think of what is it? Sleeping Beauty, right? Where she's offered the poisonous apple, but it looks so pretty.
Oh, yeah. I know. Beware. Right.
And along with this are medications.
Exactly.
Right. I was telling you before we started recording that I have a friend that is highly allergic to corn, which, corn in and of itself isn't a chemical, but cornstarch is used as a filler in a lot of medications. So those little tablets that you get might have cornstarch to make them a tablet. And so being so allergic to corn, her medication would make her sick. Same thing with gluten. Some medications can have gluten in it. So if you're celiac, you need
powder.
to know. Yeah.
Milk powder even. Yeah.
Yeah. So all of these things go together, and it's no wonder then that the things that you're trying to take to help make you feel better are actually making you feel worse.
Exactly.
And I told you before we started recording, this is the one thing I want people to get when they're listening to this. So for you listening, this is the thing I want you to get from our conversation. If you have been diagnosed with fibromyalgia or really anything else, but this is the Fibromyalgia Podcast. So if you've been diagnosed with fibromyalgia and the things that you have been prescribed or the natural supplements that you're taking, if you're doing those things and they don't work for you and they are actually making you feel worse, pay attention. This is multiple chemical sensitivities, MCS. It is something that you may want to explore because once you can uncover that and then avoid the things that you need to avoid, your body can actually start healing. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that and how you were able to turn the corner?
So when I found out about this condition, I also discovered that I was very fortunate because I live in Toronto. There is actually one of the rare environmental health clinics in the world, and right here in Toronto. And so I asked my doctor to refer me to this clinic. And the professionals that I met there were outstanding. They formally diagnosed me with MCS. I was also told that based on my health history, they suspected that I had been living with MCS for at least 20 years. So the 20 years that I talk about, that's where that came from.
Yep.
So that explained all those years. They also felt that I had also been living with fibromyalgia for 20 years.
So even though your diagnosis had come more recently, they thought that was part of the problem all along.
That I had both.
Which makes sense. I mean, you were talking about unrefreshing sleep. You were talking about, that lack of energy, those things that we all recognize.
Exactly. But MCS and fibro have a lot of overlapping symptoms, but there's also some differences, right? So it all gets kind of confusing if you have both or more, right?
Yeah.
And none are diagnosed. So you just don't know what's going on. But they were able to, figure it all out. And they really helped me to understand what this condition is. I received an incredible education from world-class top specialists, Dr. John Malott and Dr. Lynn Marshall, who are very well respected in the field. Unfortunately, Dr. Marshall passed away last year, but she had an incredible 55-year career. And so I learned so much from them. And thanks to them, I was able to make changes in my life. I understood that I had to, that each person is different. First of all, the way this begins is that we each have what's called a body burden of chemicals that basically is like if you think of a reservoir that we're accumulating through living. And some people are better able to handle it than others. And for some of us who can't handle that, it's the immune system that at some point feels overburdened and starts to react. And usually it tends to be triggered by one of two things. Either you've been exposed to a large amount of chemicals all at once, and that is too much.
Like those people in those sick buildings.
In those
right?
sick buildings, or for example, they talk about like during the Gulf War, there was, oil wells that were that burned, 600 oil wells. And all of those poor veterans who came back, and they've all ended up with MCS. They talk about, the people who were at the center of the World Trade Center, the World 911, who were around there. A lot of those people ended up with MCS. So anyone who might be around like a forest fire, a big kind of fire, all of that can actually trigger MCS. The body can only take so much.
Mm-hmm.
And other times, though, another trigger can be that it's just over time, it's just accumulation, and then it's like an overflow and it just can't take anymore.
The straw that broke the camel's back.
Exactly. Exactly. That's right.
Little bit. And then all of a sudden, one day, it's just one too many.
Exactly.
Is that what you think it was for you?
Well, I think it might be because, funny enough, I was very fortunate that I have lived in many houses that were new builds.
Yep, we were just talking about that.
And the last house that I was in, where I raised these, where I was all very sick with all of those 4 children and everything. That was also a new build. So, but I had already a couple of new builds before that.
Mm-hmm. And there's also challenges with old buildings, right? Like molds and things like that. So don't y'all think that, all new houses are bad and old houses are good. They all have their issues. You just got to pick your battles.
Exactly. And I mean, new cars, and then who knows, right?
But maybe things that were you exposed to as a nurse, like as you were, I don't know. I imagine that there's things that, latex on gloves, for example. I mean, you probably are using latex free these days, but like there's things that would be used as part of your work that you would be exposed to as well.
Absolutely.
Like sanitizing agents and things like that.
Absolutely. All of that probably counts, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, it all counts at the end. That's where it all goes into that reservoir, the body burden. And if you're one of those people who is not able to also detoxify your body very well.
Yes, I was thinking as we've been talking that, because that's a couple of the things I found with genetic testing is that my body doesn't detox as well as it should. That, if things are coming in and you can't clear them out, that reservoir would fill more quickly, right?
Exactly. That's right. That's right. So it's really important to know these things about yourself, because then you need to focus on literally making detoxification a routine part of your life. You have to create that as something that you do regularly, and there are many different ways of doing that, but you have to know how. And in order to keep the body burden down, right, in order to prevent possibly triggering MCS.
And I also bet a huge piece of this too is avoiding new exposure.
Absolutely. Well, it is important to avoid new exposure, but awareness is the first thing. Being aware of all of these things is really the first step, and then knowing what to do. And one of the things that's become noticed is that this condition isn't just for a few unlucky people. It's actually spreading. They're finding that at the moment, let me see. At the moment, worldwide, I have here, worldwide, there is an increase of approximately 300% between 2008 and 2018.
That's 3 times. Is people diagnosed? 300% in diagnoses? Yeah.
Yes.
So 3 times as many people.
Yeah. Of course, women are 75% of women are women, because of possibly the estrogen dominance, because most of these chemicals tend to trigger more estrogen.
Yep.
And we're also finding that more recently, they're finding that now newborns are coming into this world with a body burden already,
instead of coming in with a clean slate.
With a clean slate, the way they should.
Yeah.
So the reason is now that they're finding that these chemicals are going through the placenta into the baby's bloodstream. They're not able to eliminate it. They're born with a body burden already. And unfortunately, these chemicals are now also going through the mother's milk, maternal milk. So that also, continues to explain why these numbers are continuing to grow. So the encouraging part of this whole picture is that the world is now putting more money and more focus and more energy towards green initiatives. They've been talking about it for a long, long time, but it seems like now there's a real serious effort. And these green initiatives are wonderful, because the greener our environment can become, not only is it good for the environment, for the world, for the trees, the oceans, the air, but it's also good for us.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that will eliminate plastics anywhere in our daily lives will help us. It'll help to reduce that body burden, and it will help to prevent these numbers of MCS patients from growing. And it'll help the ones who have MCS from, getting worse.
To be able to be healthier and
be able to be healthier. Exactly.
Yeah. Now, I know you have a couple of things that you've created on your website to help people who are wondering, is this me? You want to share a little bit about that?
Yes. So not everyone knows. Sometimes they may think that they may have some symptoms. They may be wondering, if they're not feeling well, if they're in their home, or if they are at work, they realize that they feel a little dizzy every time they're at work, or they may have symptoms at work and then they don't have them at home, or vice versa. Or they go to someone's home who uses air fresheners, and then they feel something strongly when they're around the air fresheners, that they don't normally. If they start feeling some symptoms that are a bit strange, or maybe they're reacting to medication like I was, I have a quiz, an MCS quiz that they can take, and it's free. So they can just go ahead and take that quiz, and it'll tell them if there is a possibility that they might have MCS. I also have other free resources if they come to my website, so that they can also gather more information. And if they think that they have MCS, I think that they should take this opportunity to talk to their doctors and look into this more seriously. And there might be specialists, where they live. There could be an environmental health clinic in their area. There could also be special environmental health specialists. There could be a network in their area. I certainly am there to help people. I've worked with clients who have MCS. Even just recently, I had a client who had breast implants. Breast implants are also another cause of MCS when they leak, especially. That certainly adds to the body burden, and that can trigger MCS. So I did work with this client just recently who had an explant and is now going through detox. So
what's your web address for people who are thinking, yeah, I need to go take that quiz and find out if this is what I'm dealing with?
Sure. So my web address is gisellemcdiarmidcoaching.com.
Awesome. And we will have that in today's show notes. So fibromyalgiapodcast.com/109. We will have Giselle's link there. And she's actually one of the coaches you'll be able to schedule a consultation with on our Find a Coach page as well. So I know we're over time, Giselle, so I want us to wrap this up. But before we do, I just wanted to give you a chance to speak from your heart as somebody who has gone through all of this, been in that place of all these things that are trying to make me feel better, make me feel worse. And now what do I do? I would like for you to just speak from your heart to the people listening, because I know there is somebody listening right now who is in that exact situation. What would you say to her?
So what I would like to say is I know how hard this can be. I know how frustrating and how lonely this can be, that no one understands. You may not even understand what's going on, and all the limitations that it can put on your life. But try to get the information. Go to my website, start there at least, and get the information you need, and start looking into what's making you sick, because there's a lot of help, and you don't have to live this way. Also remember that it's okay if other people don't believe you.
I love that.
Don't worry about that. As long as you know that what you're going through is real, that's all that matters. So even if your doctor doesn't believe you, that's okay. You can still ask your doctor for referrals to the specialists who know about what you're going through. And those are the ones who will recognize what you have, and they will validate your experience. So that was my experience. You just need to remember that it's okay if as long as you stand firm and in what you know is true. And even when we have a chronic illness like this, our life isn't over. We have ways of making adjustments, and I am more than happy to help you make those adjustments to learn how. And life can be beautiful. You can get better. I went from a crisis to living a full life again, and you can do it too. When you know what to do and how to do it with support and encouragement, your life will be beautiful again. So I just wish you all the best.
Thank you so much, Gisèle. And I think that is a perfect ending. Obviously, we could talk about this for days.
Yes.
But hopefully for you listening, this gives you maybe a new idea, a new something that you can look into when everything else has not been working. And definitely reach out to Gisèle. Like, this is a path that she has walked. And that is the beautiful thing about coaching, is that you get to work with somebody who has been where you want to go and can show you all the shortcuts and help you get there faster. So stay tuned. I'm going to have our listener shout out. There's also some cool events that are coming up that I want to share with you. So hang on for a second, y'all. I will have that in right after this.
Thank you, Tami.
And that wraps up my interview with Gisèle McDiarmid. Gisèle and I really hope that her story gives you some new ideas. If you're one of the many people who have been struggling to find ways to feel better, who have a lot of weird reactions to medications, who find that they feel worse instead of feeling better when they take the treatments that are supposed to help them, then MCS might be part of the picture for you. Multiple chemical sensitivities is something I have seen in many of my clients, particularly, like I said, those who struggle to find ways to feel better that don't also make them sick in the process. So if you've taken medications and have had side effects, if you've taken supplements, all those kinds of things can really be a pointer to MCS as an underlying factor for you. Make sure you go check out the quiz that Gisèle has designed to help you uncover if this is a factor for you. Again, we've got all the links on today's show notes. It's at fibromyalgiapodcast.com/109. And as I mentioned, Gisèle is one of the coaches you can meet with. If you go to our Find a Coach page, you can fill out a form and then schedule directly with Gisèle. Just go to findafibrocoach.com, or today's show notes page will have a link there as well, and you can schedule a consultation directly with Gisèle. Now, I said we have a few fun events coming up. Starting today, as this episode comes out, we have the Freedom from Fibromyalgia Summit. This is an annual summit that is presented by Dr. Tox, and I am one of the speakers. In fact, today, day one, I am one of the featured speakers. If you are interested in joining the Freedom from Fibromyalgia Summit, it is several days of lots of experts. It's a whole week long. You can attend for free while it's being shared live. You can attend for free. You can also purchase access, lifetime access to all of the talks. We will have a link in today's show notes where you can go do that. There is also a replay weekend where they're going to replay all of the talks again, and that is right at the beginning of June. So go to today's show notes, fibromyalgiapodcast.com, and look for the Freedom from Fibromyalgia Summit. There is all kinds of speakers. Like I mentioned, I'm there on day one. Dr. Roger Murphy, Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum, Melissa Talwar from Support Fibro. There is just a bunch of people here covering a lot of different topics. I think you'll find it extremely helpful. Again, it's free to attend live. You can also purchase lifetime access. So go to fibromyalgiapodcast.com/109, and we will have that link for you. Now I've got our listener shout out. This was posted on Apple Podcasts from Glamma Heidi. And she says, I enjoyed the most recent podcast with Dr. Ginevra. You two very much help with the feeling of being misunderstood and alone. Your vulnerability was so appreciated. Hang in there as you continue your pursuits towards feeling good and finding the new you. This podcast is amazing. She was referring there to episode 106, When Life Implodes, the interview that I did with Dr. Ginevra Lipton. Some of you will be aware of her. Some of you will have already heard that episode. But if you haven't, go check that out. Dr. Ginevra is a fibromyalgia expert, a fibro specialist. She was the medical director for many years of the Frida Center for Fibromyalgia, her own fibro clinic. Last year, she closed the clinic and went through a whole bunch of stuff. Divorce, having to move, just all kinds of things, and went through what a lot of us go through when our life implodes, a massive fibro flare and depression. Just because you're an expert like Dr. Ginevra or me doesn't mean that you get to never have these things happen to you again. Life continues to happen, and it is a fantastic interview. So if you haven't heard it yet, make sure you go check that out. Fibromyalgiapodcast.com/106 if you want to go directly to the interview with Dr. Ginevra. We will also have the link on today's show notes, fibromyalgiapodcast.com/109. See you back here next time.